Oh, maybe is that test? Okay, that should help.
All right, let's see.
Okay, answer. Can you hear now? Oh, God. Test.
Oh, open.
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody who's answering my. Oh. Cool.
Oh God.
Okay. 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 There you got your PowerPoint, and now. Okay. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Jess Myrick. I'm a professor of media studies in the Donald P. Belisario College of Communications. I want to welcome you to the semester's Robert M. Pockrass Memorial Lecture. Dr. Pockrass was a member of the Penn State journalism faculty from 1948 until 1977. His teaching specialties were radio news writing, public opinion, and popular culture. He loved to travel. For these reasons, speakers from the lecture series are often notable experts in popular culture, public opinion, and international communication. Dr. Pockrass possibly was best known, though, for his dedication to students, not only when they were enrolled on campus, but after they left Penn State. For many years, he edited the school's alumni news, keeping in touch with hundreds of alumni. He once attributed his great ability to remember the names and faces of countless graduates to the fact that he had for years edited the alumni notes. But those close to him knew that it was really because he cared so much about students as human beings. The purpose of this lecture is to honor Dr. Pockrass's memory and his many contributions to the former school of journalism. The lecture series was endowed through scores of gifts contributed in his honor, the most significant of which has been made by Judith Hardis of Phoenix, a 1952 Penn State graduate with family ties. Judith emphasized how much she had admired Bob Pockrass's commitment to and talent for teaching. So on behalf of the Pockrass Coordinating Committee, which is myself, Mary Beth Oliver, Michelle Berdino Colicino, and Sarah Liao, we'd like to thank you all for coming. We'd also like to thank Dean Marie Harden, our department head, Matt Jordan, Steve Samsel, our director of communications, and Whitney Justice in the comm office for helping us promote the event. So now on to the main attraction. Dr. Jessica Maddox I almost said my own name. Oh, yeah, it is very similar. I was like, wait, that's not right. Okay. Dr. Jessica Maddox is an assistant professor at the University of Alabama in the Department of Journalism and Creative Media in the College of Communication and Information Sciences. Dr. Maddox's work could not be more timely and is of great importance in helping us understand the full array of content we can find on social media and how both the cute and the ugly play a role in our democracy. Her first book, The Internet is for Cats, has an amazing cover, as you'll see later, and amazing content. I highly recommend it. Think of it what you will, but I have to thank Twitter, actually, for introducing me to Dr. Maddox and her work. I was personally thrilled to find someone else who was interested in studying digital pet media. But her work really adds fantastic nuance and perspective to how social media and memes in particular, as well as TikTok and other forms of audiovisual content, can grasp our collective attention. I will let her fill you in on how and the ramifications of that process with her talk. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Maddox to Happy Valley.
All right, thank you, Jess. Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? I mentioned I'm bad at microphones. Yes, perfect. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you to Dr. Myrick and the entirety of the Belisario family for inviting me. I was very excited and honored to receive this invitation, and I really look forward to chatting with you all this evening. Let's get to it, but I also do want to advise that starting from slide 7 onward, there may be some images some viewers may find disturbing. But all right, I want to begin by asking everybody, what is the craziest thing you have ever done to win an argument? Because mine was write the book this talk came from. So my entire stance as a researcher and professor begins from the position that all research is personal. I am a critical scholar that is interested in interrogating power dimensions found in quotidian and overlooked social practices, particularly online. My work is necessarily subjective, as I am often a consumer and participant of the very online communities and cultures that I study. and I embrace that. As Black feminist digital media scholar Catherine Knight Steele has argued, being present in the online communities that you study before you study them is essential to understanding nuance in the research process. But I'm also a human, and my humanity and my experiences cannot be separated from my research, and nor would I ever try to do so. So meet Rudy. In fall 2018, right after my partner and I moved to Tuscaloosa, we decided to foster this 8-week-old puppy. And if you can't see what that says, this is a post from the Tuscaloosa Metro Animal Shelter asking for donations. They say, meet Rudy. Rudy is a super sweet little boy, but he has hit a rough patch. Poor Rudy has 2 broken legs. We want to help him. Each surgery will cost, and so on. Rudy had been found thrown out of a moving car and ultimately actually had 5 leg fractures. He had 3 surgeries to put 35 pieces of metal screws and plates in him to rebuild his legs. And when he came home with us, I didn't know what to do. My partner and I had a 7-year-old dog at that point. We knew how to take care of dogs, but we didn't know how to take care of a puppy that was so broken. So I turned to Instagram. I started following special needs dogs on the platform, learning about their journeys, how to deal with dogs and puppies on crate rest, and things like that. I was really enjoying and valuing my time in this community. So one night I turned to my partner and I said, I think I'm gonna make Rudy his own Instagram account. And he rolled his eyes at me and said, don't do that. That's such a thing basic white girls do. The feminist media scholar in me went, what? Excuse me? So I accepted that as a personal challenge. But his words, in all seriousness, sparked a curiosity in me. Why would someone make an Instagram account for their pet? And why were the practices of pet Instagrams, not just for special needs pets, but for all pets, considered so-called basic? So I ultimately designed a research study, received IRB approval. This study interviewed people who ran Instagram accounts on behalf of their pets. And it became The Secret Life of Pet Instagram Accounts, Joy, Resistance, and Commodification in the Internet's Cute Economy, published in New Media and Society. In this research, I found insights into self-representation practices online, as well as a recurring theme. My participants were very interested in inserting cuteness and joy into spaces that did not seem to readily have much. Thus, I theorized pet Instagram accounts through Michel de Certeau's tactics as a way for people to create their own spaces and resist aspects of the internet that they didn't like. For instance, one of my participants told me, quote, my close circle of friends, a lot of ways we communicate is we forward Instagram posts or memes to each other. I would say a good percentage of the ones I contribute to the conversation are cute animal things, like to break up the sadness of the world. For instance, here's a list of all the people who died in Afghanistan this week, but also here's a French bulldog all tucked in for bed. I guess pet Instagram accounts fall into that category. You want to make sure that there's stuff getting into people's heads and minds, that it's not all doom and gloom and capitalism. I don't know. Those seem to be the 2 things everything is on the internet these days. Everyone is trying to sell you something, or the world is falling apart, end quote. But it also wasn't that straightforward, because people are complicated, and therefore the content and the things they do and share online are complicated. One of my participants also told me, and I heard something similar from several, I started an account to make my cat Insta famous. Another told me, we realized if we could get some free dog toys or dog food because our puppy was popular, that would be great. So the very things my participants spoke of wanting to resist were some of their motivations for creating these accounts in the first place. This made me realize that internet awe cannot readily be untangled from internet ew. And suddenly I had 1,000 more questions than when I started. And just like that, my book was born. The Internet is for Cats, How Animal Images Shape Our Digital Lives, out now with Rutgers University Press. This book is a digital ethnography of pet and animal social media cultures, exploring how this content is created and shared across sites like Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, YouTube, and more. Definitely happy to answer more questions about digital ethnography as a method during Q&A. As for my book's theoretical positioning, it exists at the intersection all my research does, somewhere between internet studies and cultural studies. In the inaugural issue of the journal Social Media and Society, also do we have technical difficulties? Oh, yes. Oh, couldn't hear anything. Oh, no. Oh, okay.
Sorry, I just want to make sure.
Yes, no, absolutely. Oh, that's all good. No worries. Zoom live, right? Zoom live, right? In the inaugural issue of the journal Social Media and Society, Daniel Brabham wrote, quote, "It is easy to latch on to the most visible, newsworthy highlights of the social media sphere in order to make a point. But very few social media users use social media tools to coordinate revolutions. Just as the study of culture and history should consider the normal and everyday experiences of populations alongside timelines of important battles and economic milestones, so too should the study of social media," end quote. Brabham's call underscores the importance of cultural studies in internet research. For instance, cultural studies has long been concerned with the ordinary, the everyday, the powerful, and the overlooked. The seemingly frivolous is never just frivolous, but reifies power structures. As Richard Johnson wrote in What is Cultural Studies Anyway? Culture is not something people have, but something they do. Therefore, my research comes from a critical and often interpretivist perspective that understands materiality as essential to what people do online. Within cultural studies, I keep a particular eye to internet studies here and how these practices reify power structures online. And that became the thesis of my book. The internet is for cats. It's for cute, silly, little, adorable pictures of animals, but the internet's also a dumpster fire. To be sure, people can and do use the internet for more than one reason. But my participants said they wanted to insert joy, some relief, distractions from the toxicity of digital spaces. They wanted to resist perfect influencer culture, doom and gloom, partisan politics, filter bubbles, misinformation, etc. Which made me realize we can't talk about the cute, the wholesome, the relief, and the distractions without talking about the ugly, the cumbersome, and what we need relief and distractions from. If you're wondering right now if we can have any nice things, the answer is absolutely. But talking about internet culture requires a heaping dose of specificity that is often absent in analysis, particularly in journalistic coverage of phenomenon. And we're not here to say if something's good or bad. I find those labels really unproductive. Instead, what can we learn about media, culture, and society, and how can these practices be found or used in ways we might not readily anticipate? So in my research, I found 3 dominant cultural tenets that underscore much of the creation, consumption, and sharing of pet and animal social media content. Attention, or the idea that the internet is an attention economy. Cuteness and joy, which I associate with one another because of their dialectical relationship, as well as neoliberalism. So the internet has often been referred to as what we call an attention economy. And what I mean by this comes from some earlier writings on the subject. Writing on attention at the start of the 21st century, Mark Andrejevic historicized attention's role to note how it functions in tandem with digital technology. Drawing on the insights of political economists Sut Jolly, Bill Levant, and Dallas Smythe, Andrejevic elaborated on the notion that audiences were working when they were watching television. In the social media era, the work of watching coexists alongside the work of being watched. Individuals continue to consume content, but are more heavily monitored and surveyed by social media platforms themselves, who turn human culture into quantifiable bits, often for advertisers. This is why Greg Elmer, a communication scholar, has pointed out that Facebook is the world's largest unpaid labor force, as everything we do on it, with its over 1 billion users, is turned into data for advertisers. This creates the idea of the internet as an attention economy. By this, we talk about content production and consumption in terms of supply and demand. And the content that is considered most successful is that which attracts eyeballs. Simply put, there's more content available than anyone could ever feasibly consume, even in their own niche area. Regarding pet and animal social media specifically, I think this TikTok actually explains attention better than I ever could.
So apparently people on TikTok like this. You walk in and boom, kitty. And now we're TikTok famous.
So what this TikTok gets at is it uses an audio meme or a recurring sound on TikTok to say, one, I hear people on TikTok love this, meaning we have a kind of recurring interest. And also the idea that simply showing a cute cat, which don't get me wrong, that cat's adorable, is simply enough to become internet famous. The idea here is this can attract attention and is then often imbricated in cuteness as well. Cuteness and joy, the internet has also been referred to as a cute economy, meaning Well, cute things do really well online. They're in high supply and they're in high demand. That which is cute does do ostensibly well in the attention economy, but it's not always that simple or straightforward. Cuteness isn't a guarantee of attention, but it can help. Online, obviously, we seek out things that bring us joy. And for pet and animal social media, yeah, this can be a bit obvious. But I'd argue again, this is not straightforward. While scholars in cute studies, psychology, and philosophy have identified formal properties of cute, this is also a culture and community dependent, and what brings one group joy may be abhorred by someone else. And then neoliberalism. While I'm not here to ignore economics entirely, I find Rosalind Gill's discussion of neoliberal subjectivities and Christina Scharf's discussion of the psychic life of neoliberalism more interesting. As Stuart Hall famously wrote, economic neoliberalism ushers in cultural neoliberalism, in which individuals adopt deregulatory, self-sustaining tenets to become productive citizens in a world that offers little social support. This includes self-monitoring, self-surveillance, and self-discipline, also a heightened emphasis on identity, and the technical architectures of social media platforms turn this identity into a hyper-discursive phenomenon in which identities are exchanged, consumed, and produced as currency online. For pet and animal social media, I was obviously interested in some economic dimensions here, such as pet influencers, which I'll talk about momentarily. But I was also interested in the proliferation of things like alternative parent labeling, such as dog mom, cat mom, dog dad, etc. So actually, peer review for my book asked me to leave my discussion of this TikTok on the cutting room floor. So I said, great, I'll put it in my book talk instead. So this is an advertisement that came up during my digital ethnography. It's pretty quick at the beginning, so I might play it twice, but then we'll talk about it.
Hey moms
And cat moms, dog moms, plant moms.
say these with me.
I am loved. I am strong. I am worthy of treating myself
With Lancome Idéal Longtemps.
It smells like rose and fresh jasmine with musk and a little bit of vanilla.
Remind yourself what you are capable of.
So in case you didn't hear her at the beginning, she says, hey moms, dog moms, plant moms, cat moms, other moms, etc. This is a real TikTok. This is not parody. This is a Lancome advertisement. It came out about a week before Mother's Day in 2021 when I first saw it in the course of my research. And here we see this hailing of alternative forms of motherhood in popular discourse. But as Sarah Benet-Weiser has discussed in her discussions on the ambivalence of brand culture, this isn't just about trying to market towards more audiences. By producing advertisements like this, it upholds the discourse, reifies it, and validates this as a form of identity. So this is the type of pet and animal social media neoliberalism that I'm interested in. Unintentionally, economics, both literal and figurative, became guiding tenets of this research, though I'm actually staunchly critical of using economic metaphors to describe social practice. I don't think economics map neatly or at all to what we do in culture, which is why in discussing these metaphors, I focus on materiality to show how these social practices are produced, learned, and sustained. This is a perspective of hegemony, materiality, and interiority, as opposed to finding what Jacques Derrida, who also had a lot to say about cats, had called the last instance. The last instance never comes in cultural analysis because we can't find a sole cause as the driver of social life. As media scholar John Hartley discusses, quote, for a long time, since Marx, in fact, social life has been supposed to be powered in every sense of the word by the economy. We're not used to thinking about communication, culture, and meaning as the drivers of human change, end quote. Hartley's words reflect Derrida, Stuart Hall, Louis Althusser, Antonio Gramsci, who all pushed back on this idea that a single thing powers social, culture, and political life. And coining terms like the attention economy or the cute economy, cultural analysis can risk falling into reductive economic traps. While such terms may be employed as metaphors, the ideological legwork is immense. As Brett Frischman points out, the metaphor of the cloud simply means that we are comfortable with our data living on someone else's computer. I'm not suggesting throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to these ideas of attention or cute economy, but rather it is imperative to consider the ideological legwork done by these terms. So in my research, I focus on these tenets through what visual scholar Gillian Rose calls social modalities, or the range of forces that influence an image and how it is seen and used. As such, I'm not just doing close readings of images themselves, but I am historicizing and contextualizing them throughout.
So apparently people
We
on
don't need,
TikTok
I mean, we can
like
see the
this.
kitty again,
Hey,
You walk
mom.
but we'll go on. So I mentioned my thesis was we can't talk about the cute, the wholesome, the relief, and the distractions without talking about the ugly, the cumbersome, and what we need relief and distractions from. But even within cuteness and attention and hailing ourselves through heightened identity claims, there's ambivalence. And here I follow what Winnie Phillips and Ryan Milner say about ambivalence. Quote, simultaneously antagonistic and social, creative and disruptive, humorous and barbed. Too variable across specific cases to be essentialized as this as opposed to that, nor can they be pinned to one singular purpose, because they are not singular. They inhabit instead a full spectrum of purposes, all depending on who is participating, who is observing, and what set of assumptions each person brings to a given interaction. Internet culture is complicated and complex, and pet and animal social media are no exception. For example, in my work, I came across this blue image you see at the bottom of your screen. And it's a site called Pets Add Life, and they sponsored a lot of pet and animal videos on YouTube. So what this site does is it has an entry quiz for people who are interested in adopting a pet, and it kind of matched an ideal pet up with your lifestyle. And if you'll allow me an animal welfare moment, that's great. Too many people adopt pets that are ill-suited for their lifestyle. But when I browsed this site further, I saw this image you see here. And their scrolling text, adding on to their motto, they added other reasons or other things pets would add to someone's life. And what jumped out at me the most was pets add likes, noting that a reason to adopt a pet would be increased social media clout. This focus on the practice of attention was underscored by things I'd already heard from some of my participants, such as getting free supplies and wanting a cat to be Insta-famous. This also demonstrates the imbrication both with cuteness and the economic drivers that are present in sponsored sites and free supplies as well. At this intersection, there were also guides on how to make your dog or cat or bunny or bearded dragon internet famous. There are subscription boxes pushed heavily by Instagram's algorithms, harping the identity-focused nature of subscription services. There's a box or service for everything of every interest these days, and this is a byproduct of neoliberalism imbricated with social media. We live in an era of hyper-identity, and boxes like the Dog Mom box that you see here allow you to boast that identity label whenever and wherever. But this isn't the only type of pet content online. Sure, some of what we just saw was cute, it was joyful, but also a little ambivalent. Adopting a pet for social media clout kind of feels icky to me. But then there's the overtly toxic, the extremely ambivalent, and the complicated pet and animal social media content as well. There's this idea that the internet is for cats. On one hand, it's the cute, the adorable, the wholesome, the joyful. And then there's the rest of it. Then there's the toxic stuff, the harassment, the hate speech, the polarization, the misinformation. But sometimes the cats are all those things I just said. Brought into the discourse by the famous Netflix docuseries, Don't Fuck with the Cats. Crush videos continue to persist online, particularly on sites like OnlyFans, in which individuals harm, often through stepping on small animals. This fall, the US National Park Service launched their annual Fat Bear Week, an annual tournament for the bears in Alaska's Katmai National Park. Individuals vote on the fattest bear as the creatures prepare for winter hibernation. This year, though, the competition was rocked by something all too common on the internet, a bot attack. You may be asking, why on earth would someone bother? It's a wholesome, harmless fat bear competition. But I'd counter that the quotidian enables the insidious. Trolls and bad actors do things because they can. And when we laugh this off, Fat Bear Week, as not mattering, we're ignoring that this might be practice for something more insidious. And this so-called mundane instance normalizes our response. Oh, these things just happen online. No, they shouldn't. Memes have also been a frequent source of vitriol online, with animal memes being especially so. Media studies scholar Jacqueline Vickery has written a great analysis of advice animal memes, specifically the confession bear meme that you see here, which was originally intended as a way for users to disclose harmless secrets about themselves, quickly descended into violence and hate, as you can see here. Animal imagery is therefore ideal for trolls who seek to preserve ambiguity and accomplish their goals while sustaining questionable intent. Pepe the Frog and former President Trump's use of the meme, which I will be discussing in depth momentarily. And then the last image on here is from a 2020 campaign ad of then Senate candidate Reverend Raphael Warnock in my home state of Georgia. It featured him walking an adorable beagle. Warnock and his beagle here are not the toxicity, but this ad was deliberately tapping into a toxicity present in American life. In the ad, Warnock walks his dog in a suburban neighborhood, talking about people seeing through his opponent's attack ads. But there's a lot of ideological work happening here. In sociologist Sarah Mayorga Gallo's work on how dog walking functions in mixed race neighborhoods, she found white individuals were more likely to view neighborly encounters with dog walkers more positively when the owner was of the same race. This upholds existing stereotypes about Americans and pet ownership. Individuals believe Black and Latinx individuals are more likely to own aggressive breeds, such as Rottweilers and Pit Bulls, while white individuals are believed to own more wholesome breeds, such as Beagles, Labradors, and Golden Retrievers. In the social media age, these stereotypes are transferred to pets themselves, with individuals going to shelters and requesting any pet but a Black one because Black dogs and cats are not photographable for social media. This phenomenon of overlooking Black dogs and cats for adoption predates social media and has been referred to by sociologists and shelter advocates as Black dog syndrome. Social media has merely allowed this phenomenon to persist in conjunction with the material photographic practices individuals believe that are necessary for social media content creation. This also harkens back to the initial story I told at the beginning of this research, that sharing and creating pet content is something basic white girls do. While people I talked to span the globe, ages, religions, races, and occupations, they were typically overwhelmingly white and identified as female at the end of the day, along with enough disposable income or the privilege to have credit to spend on pets. So as we can see, pet ownership, pet image creation and sharing, and pet image consumption are heavily imbricated not just with internet dynamics, but offline ones as well. This brings me to Pepe the Frog. Pepe was a cartoon frog originally created in 2005 by Matt Fury for his comic series Boys Club. Pepe was portrayed as a chill dude with his roommates hanging around and smoking a lot of weed. And what's become Pepe's famous saying, "feels good, man," the original comic strip Pain had Pepe urinating while uttering the phrase. Pepe quickly gained a bit of a cult following on forums such as Something Awful and 4chan's B-board in the late 2000s, early 2010s, particularly as a reaction meme or an image shared in response to something. But around 2014, Pepe started cropping up on more mainstream sites like Tumblr, and then was tweeted in separate instances by American music artists Nicki Minaj and Katy Perry, which really kind of helped him explode into mainstream popularity. But individuals on Something Awful and 4chan didn't care for this. They began a campaign to reclaim Pepe from the normies. Normies here meaning individuals who are not like them on these forums. To do this, they created the most disgusting, hateful version of Pepe memes, uttering the likes of things that as a Jewish woman made me sick to say, but said things like, "kill Jews, man." Then in 2016, then presidential candidate Donald Trump tweeted this image of himself as Pepe, leading to the Anti-Defamation League to declare the meme a hate symbol. The thing about animal images, including animal memes like Pepe, is that they're hyper malleable. Not only do they rely on the idea of ambivalence, but animal imagery itself is variable and can be molded like clay. Memes are meant to be variable. They're meant to be changed into endless possible iterations, constantly adding on to the conversation. But when we add animals to it and specifically make the animal memes speak via anthropomorphism, they become even more affective, ambivalent, and powerful. Anthropomorphism is a distancing concept that allows individuals to insert distance between themselves and what they say, putting a different mouthpiece on the subject. This is not to say all animal memes are toxic. Rather, there are specific antagonisms that emerge when considering memes in conjunction with attention, cuteness, and neoliberalism. These antagonisms and distancing afforded by anthropomorphism are specifically beneficial to identity wars, particularly those pursued by the alt-right. There's a really great example from the neoliberalism arm of my project on anthropomorphism as distancing. So in 2020, I attended PetCon, the annual pet influencer and talent convention. And the PetCon founder spoke and said something rather striking. She said, quote, "Pets have taken center stage in influence. You get all the benefits of the human influencer with the cuteness of pets. Everyone loves pets. They're joyful, they're cute, they make us happy. But they're not going to get drunk at a party and hurt your brand like a human influencer," end quote. As someone who spends a lot of time also studying content creators and influencers, this was fascinating to me. This distancing of anthropomorphism is at work here to give brands a safety net for pets to be centered with their products as opposed to people. To state the complete obvious, pets don't make the content themselves, right? The humans have to be behind them to do it. They have to have humans do it for them. But in these cases, if the human does get drunk at a party and pet influence, the risk to the sponsored brand is lower. Anthropomorphism provides leeway and influence, and for individuals who also may want to espouse harmful ideas through animal memes, in tandem with ambivalence and things like Poe's law, which states nothing on the internet is to be taken seriously. For animal memes, this makes animal images such as hate speech extremely powerful and rather ideal communication devices. It's not me, it's Pepe. I mean it, but I also don't. But online, images circulate with intense affect and high speed. Given the hyper-discursive nature of digital spaces, affect becomes exponentially amplified the more an image or a meme is spread. This reinforces group identity and boundary formation while forming a culturally specific attachment to the meme in question. In the battle for Pepe that emerged, we saw all of the tenets I identify in pet and animal social media. This is no accident because at its core, Pepe is an animal. After Trump tweeted the image of Pepe and the ADL declared the meme a hate symbol, original creator Matt Fury and his publisher put out a statement. They said Pepe was never meant to be about hate. They argued for fans to flood the internet with positive Pepe memes, something that essentially amounts to attention hacking or a coordinated effort to change the direction eyeballs are looking online. Attention hacking has long been a technique used by Gamergate and those on the alt-right to shift the Overton window, but now we saw it back in a fighting back technique. We also see neoliberalism, not as economics, but as a focus on identities. Whenever we talk about the alt-right and their strategies, we are talking about identities. This group believes white men are losing their so-called rightful place in society to women, people of color, and other minorities. And in the battle for Pepe, this group believed that attacking specific identity groups, such as Jewish people, would make the meme deplorable. And cuteness, and more specifically, joy. Fury, his publisher, and Pepe's original fans found joy in the original Pepe, and they wanted to reclaim that joy. But for those on 4chan and Something Awful, their joy was in Pepe as an in-group meme, or the meme also functioned as a boundary-setting device between them and the normies. Notably, joy functions collectively online. My original pet Instagram participants discussed joy akin to a we mode of collective engagement, working to make their spaces habitable while they took care of one another. This is the same thing we see with 4chan and Something Awful trying to reclaim Pepe from the normies. This is not an apologist position, but rather a prompt that when we think about communities online and collective engagement, as well as making spaces habitable, we have to ask who its space is being made habitable for. In my book, I titled this chapter about Pepe, Feels Good Man, Collisions, Collusions, and Cloaks in Pet and Animal Social Media. This is terminology I borrow from privacy studies, as well as considerations of how racism functions under the guise of humor and ambivalence online. While at first seemingly disparate concepts, I apply this notion of collisions, collusions, and cloaks to show how they are deliberate and how animal imagery, specifically animal memes, function as these cloaks. Collisions and collusions harken back to the idea of context collapse, or how online all audiences are kind of meshed into one mass. When you post, you've got your family, your friends, your teachers, classmates, all in one potential audience. Jenny Davis and Nathan Jurgensen coined the terms context collision and collusion to better describe that range of audiences meshing together. They define context collision as occasions in which contexts come together without effort on part of the actor, whereas collusions are the purposeful, intentional bringing together of various social contexts and their networks. The difference here being intentionality and whether one means to collude or collide. Here I look at collusions and collisions within the cultural practice of meme sharing. Tenets of pet and animal social media, specifically attention, cuteness, joy, neoliberalism, underscores the bulk of this visual culture, but these ideas can be wielded in purposeful ways that do not necessarily have end goals that we may aspire to. The case of Pepe is one such instance of this. For Pepe the Frog, his initial spread from 4chan and something awful to the mainstream was a cultural collision. This was unintentional, where subcultures unwillingly collided with each other. In an effort to reclaim Pepe, those on the alt-right engaged in cultural collusions or the intentional manipulation of internet cultural tenets to accomplish their goals. This collusion was deliberative on their part and underscores many of overarching practices of media manipulation. By purposefully crashing contexts together on this large scale, this group worked to reclaim Pepe, spread their ideologies, and collude their community with the broader populace. Memes can function as ideal cultural collusions in which ideological and political beliefs of a community intertwine with the broader tenets of internet culture to accomplish specific goals. Pepe's cultural collusion was particularly useful in its form as a cloak. Or specifically, cloaks refer to the use of difficult to detect authorship and hidden agendas to accomplish political goals, including things like white supremacy. Jesse Daniels coined this term to describe covert racism hiding online, and Robert Topinka expands this notion in his analysis of the subreddit r/I'm going to hell for this. In such cases, humor and visual remediation can often mask one's true intention. Pepe as a cloak may seem antithetical, given how in an effort to reclaim him, captions attached to the meme said things like, "Kill Jews, man." But this is explicitly harmful and anti-Semitic. But what was cloaked in Pepe's cultural collusion was not necessarily these racist anti-Semitic ideas, but the secondary function of shifting the Overton window or the range of acceptable ideas in public discourse. Shifting the Overton window is often a key goal of extremist groups who seek to recruit and insert their ideologies into larger conventional discourse. Therefore, Donald Trump's use of Pepe in his campaign was not just about reclaiming Pepe, but it was about elevating Pepe so high that it could not be ignored. This is what Whitney Phillips refers to as the oxygen of amplification, or how life is breathed into whatever we discuss in public, even if we are condemning it. Pepe and animal memes in general are very effective cloaks in this manner because of their malleability and the fact that they are often dismissed as fun and silly and frivolous, as there can be a delay in assessing the depth of their implications or how serious they may function for certain groups. Animal imagery and memes in their most extreme iterations are Pepe. In minor cloaking versions, they are pet influencers masquerading a neoliberal agenda, precarious digital labor, or questionable animal welfare content. Ultimately, Matt Fury was unsuccessful in his attempt to reclaim Pepe from those on these forums, and it was no use. Pepe would live on forever, and it kind of faded out of obscurity until just another cultural collusion of him this week. When new Twitter owner Elon Musk tweeted this image this very Monday. I was so good. I had made this presentation so far in advance, and then he tweeted this and I had to go back to the drawing board. But the thing about Pepe now is he's overdone. We know what this meme stands for, and anybody using this is deliberately trolling. And Musk is a troll. We know this. And if we don't at this point, that's on us, because he has told us time and time again who he is. Musk's Pepe tweet, though, this is a distraction. This is a cultural collision to have us look over here to distract us from what he's doing over there, elsewhere on Twitter, where he's wielding internet cultural logics, heightened identities, community engagement, attention hacking, manipulating people's joy to destroy a digital public sphere that has routinely resisted people like him. All of this to say, I'd like to come back to the idea that on one hand, there's cat videos. The internet is for cats. And on the other hand, there's this toxicity. But this binary doesn't hold up, as cat video has become a signifier, an empty signifier for everything the toxic internet isn't. Interrogating pet and animal social media as toxic means pushing back on this idea. For instance, in an analysis of 4chan, as we've discussed, is one of kind of the toxic epicenters of the contemporary internet. Mark Tutters and Saul Hagen argued, quote, 4chan has been viewed as a subcultural innovation on broader mainstream web culture. While this alleged influence was of relatively narrow significance, so long as it pertained to lolcats, this changed with the recent rise in popularity of 4chan's Paul politically incorrect board, which has been described as the source of the real creative energy behind the new right-wing sensibility online today, end quote. At the end of the day, there's no such thing as good or bad internet culture. There is simply internet culture and how it is wielded. The problems aren't online racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, etc., but racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, etc. And in that context, how do online spaces provide new opportunities for widespread harm? The contemporary internet does not get lolcats without also getting crush videos and memes espousing harmful ideas. The same attention, affect, cuteness, and neoliberalism that populate everyday practices online and shifting cultural industries also function within more overtly harmful forms of online content. So if there's one thing I'd like you to take away from this talk, I'd like to focus on the proliferation of these practices and logics from the internet: attention, the attention economy, attention hacking, cuteness, joy, heightened identities, and how these tenets and practices are increasingly becoming a part of spaces where we have not seen them before. Internet scholars have long eschewed an online-offline binary, and I'm not trying to say we return to that. What I'm simply saying is I'm observing a proliferation of internet ways of being into other spaces, and I think we need to take a critical eye for that. And here's a local example for y'all, one I have been following rather closely. And that was the campaign of now Senator-elect John Fetterman. Fetterman's campaign famously used trolling logics to attack his opponent, Dr. Oz. We've seen Fetterman's campaign, quote, use social media in a more provocative, novel, creative way than we typically see from your standard bearer Republican or Democratic candidate, end quote. That's from the Los Angeles Times. The Associated Press called these tactics, quote, cheap ways for Fetterman to generate attention, end quote. Attention hacking. Well, on one hand, it's nice to see Democrats get a little creative. On the other hand, as someone who studies the internet, I'm fascinated and maybe a little even perplexed by trolling in political campaigns. Again, on one hand, we have seen alt-right people on the alt-right employ these techniques for years. My pause here isn't some pearl-clutching fear. It's a keen eye to how internet cultural logics, again, are becoming mainstream and found in places they haven't normally been found, like politics. Something also important to note in Fetterman's campaign is his social media strategist who orchestrated a lot of this was a young woman of color. This adds a new dimension to this analysis that can't be ignored. As Lisa Nakamura and Meredith Clark have written, many social media practices like call-out culture were curated by communities of color online when platforms themselves wouldn't step up to help them. In some ways, that could be a little bit of what's happening here. But in some, internet culture is a little bit everywhere, and its logics are becoming more and more prevalent in the mainstream. To me, made for social media politics, which is what I think we're seeing here in Fetterman's campaign, is an inevitable step following the strategic manipulation of internet culture in previous elections by politics, by other countries, but it goes further than that. Creating material conditions for social media content can be traced back to the early internet. And really amps up in the early to mid 2010s with the curation of Instagram aesthetics, things like goat yoga, selfies in Yeo Kasuma's Infinity Mirrors exhibition, crazy made for Instagram food, unicorn frappuccinos, crazy milkshakes. What we're seeing now is the proliferation of those same cultural tenets into other arenas like politics. While this isn't necessarily a political Insta aesthetic, we're starting to see something like a trolling political aesthetic. So here, it's not just necessarily looking at images, but practices and the conditions and histories that make them potent in the first place. Well, and if you're wondering what happened to Rudy, we foster failed him and adopted him. So that little broken boy, as you can see, nothing on earth slows him down, despite 35 pieces of metal in him. He lives his best life and inspired all of this research for me. So thank you very much, and I look forward to all your questions. And I'm also on Twitter as long as it's there. Every time it slows and loading, I think it's done. I think it's the end.
Thank you so much for that
Oh.
wonderful talk. So we do have some time for Q&A, and I forgot to mention earlier, if you're in Matt Jordan's class, there's a sign up here for once we're done. So questions? Yeah, if you wouldn't mind talking into the mic because we have some Zoom viewers.
First of all, thank you.
you.
There was a toward the beginning, there was a picture of a bear,
Right.
right? And we couldn't read the bottom of it because of the
Oh no.
yeah. You went right by it. It
Oh,
was-
I went by it. Oh,
yeah, you went by it.
So
Hey,
apparently,
Mom.
this one?
Nope.
that's
There it is,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. So this is a meme called Confession Bear. It slowly descended from harmless secrets into more disturbing confessions from Reddit users on violence, suicide. And this one says, I don't think it's fair that I can't be proud of my white identity without being called racist. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll go to, I think there might be some questions
think
on
there's some
Zoom
Zoom.
too. Okay, you're welcome to just
Let's see. Oh, goodness.
click on the.
Okay. Do we have a
Okay.
sign-in sheet for Zoom? I don't know. But I see it.
I know how to,
Yeah.
I think I have a record of who attended.
Okay.
So on
Let's
my Zoom
see.
account.
Can we see the sharing of Pepe online as injections of sadistic enjoyment into spaces of gloom and doom, as similar in function to sharing of cuteness and joy in pet photos? In other words, yes. Ways of managing consumer enjoyment and affect in an active way for the feeling of helplessness in the face of bad news. That's a great question. I do spend a fair bit of a chapter in my book talking about doom scrolling. And the process of we all just, there's so much negativity in this world. Again, thinking about the personal nature of it all, I wrote the bulk of this book during COVID, during the height of the first kind of big wave lockdown in 2020, where doom scrolling was really what it felt like we all were doing. And so I noticed people would start saying things like send pet pics, tweet pet pics, right? I need to see cuteness. And so there is definitely this active way of trying to break up that doom scrolling. But absolutely, similarly, that same technique of trying to actively break up the doom scrolling, there are techniques from individuals who do seek to kind of keep the toxicity of internet spaces more toxic by inserting toxicity. So it kind of cuts both ways. Again, why we can't necessarily say good or bad, but more of this complicated spectrum of internet practice. Oh, okay.
I have two questions, but I'll just do one first. So with the people wanting to see the pet photos and follow the pet accounts, did you notice any sort of people experiencing backlash when they were something about the way that they took care of their pet wasn't
Mhm.
the way they thought it should be? I'm thinking of, there's a cat account that I follow and they've been getting a lot of hate because the cat is really very obese.
Yes.
So they are fat shaming an animal who has no idea that it's happening.
Right.
But
yeah.
The
Yes.
the human being that is responsible for
Mhm.
the actual account is on the receiving end of all that
Right.
hateful content.
Yeah, so that's extremely common. Again, we associate these accounts as, the cute spaces. But again, it can very quickly descend into us obviously inserting our humanness in, or whatever, all the good and bad of our humanness into these conversations. Again, writing the bulk of this book in 2020. This was also around the time of George Floyd's murder. And when I'm in a lot of pet and animal Facebook groups. And so a lot of people were taking pictures of their dogs at protests in the wake following his murder and saying things like Black Lives Matter and the like. And people in these groups, I mean, if you're in any Facebook group, you know how quickly things can descend, right? And the fights were enormous, right? Of this is a space for pets. Why are you bringing politics into it? Other people said, well, this is my life. My dog is part of my life. This cause matters to me. Of course, I'm going to share it. And so keeping that in mind and thinking back to this idea of the Instagrams, absolutely. On the smaller accounts, when it was people, you know, maybe with 3 dozen followers, kind of just running this really casual account for their friends, not so much, but absolutely a lot more on this larger scale. Probably the craziest example, I don't know if anybody has heard of the kind of pet influencer Wander with Willow, but Willow is this beautiful German Shepherd, I believe German Shepherd, dog. Her parents ran this like great Instagram account for her. She got out of the backyard one day and was hit by a car and died. So they cloned her. So the Willow you see now on Wander with Willow is the clone of the original dog to keep the influence going. Lost, on one hand, lost a ton of followers for people. I mean, debates about ethics of animal cloning, right, have gone back. That's into the 90s. Like that's a very old argument at this point. But also then gained a lot for people fascinated by the clone dog. Mm-hmm.
Hi, so this is kind of more of a social question a little bit, where a lot of the memes that I saw I've never seen before, and I feel like I assume that you probably did a little bit of like, what is it, like going undercover, I guess, or like checking in on other communities. What was that like? Because I personally I'm kind of proud that I'm not part of these bad communities, but I bet it's a little bit different.
Yeah. No, that's a great question that really gets into kind of the real messiness of doing research. Is obviously, you know, I don't personally agree with or advocate for a lot of, you know, for this stuff. But then as a researcher, it's fascinating to me. It's interesting to observe these cultural processes and kind of how they play out. So yes, so I did go undercover in some ways. Some say digital ethnography or doing research entirely online is kind of like glorified lurking, like you're just kind of hanging out. But you're really hanging out with intention. You kind of know what you're looking for and you're using a keen eye to follow it. That being said, there were definitely some moments in doing this research, and I can think of one in particular, again, thinking back to these Facebook groups. This woman posted a horrific picture that somehow got through the admins before ultimately being removed, that her dog had been attacked at the dog park and killed. And she was posting the horribly graphic images of what had happened. And there wound up being a whole bunch of other things surrounding this issue. But then again, as you've seen, I have 2 dogs who I love tremendously. And that was a moment as a researcher where I had to close the laptop and step away because I was personally kind of traumatized by that. So that definitely as a researcher, you do kind of learn to negotiate. Okay, I'm looking at this for research, but you have to take care of yourself too and know when to step back.
Oh my God. Hi, so my name is Tegan, and I was just wondering, with these memes like that you have on screen, is a lot of them, they started as like just innocent images that people thought were funny. Is there a way that you think we can avoid the like future symbols of just like innocence being like spiraled out of control to these hateful groups and hateful connotations?
That's a great question. I don't know if we can avoid it, but I think we can better respond to it. This is something I've been thinking a lot about lately. I also do a lot of research into things like internet challenges and whatnot. And every time something gets picked up by the news as being the latest internet challenge, I'm like, if you actually looked at this, like 3 people did this. This is not a big thing at all. So I think learning how to manage not only our individual, but kind of collective responses through media systems, journalism, public relations, and things like that, can help us not breathe life into some of these things. Like just because something happens doesn't mean we need to always talk about it. Or we can talk about it in ways that, and report on it in ways that are responsible and not kind of breathing new life into it in the process of sharing it. I wish there were ways we could avoid things like this. But since I don't think we can necessarily avoid it, I think we can control our response to it though. Yeah.
Hi. So, my question is about humor. And we were talking about this last night at the delicious restaurant we went to.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone, you weren't there. Good food and great conversation. But anyway, we were talking about the events of October 24 when the Proud Boys were here on campus because their founder was a paid speaker here at Penn State, unfortunately. He guess he's doing a tour with Alex Stein. I think this isn't the only campus that they went to. And Alex Stein, a known, right-wing humorist, troll, basically,
Yeah.
makes his life, kind of thing, reputation with that. But it was billed as a comedy event. And I thought that was really interesting rhetorically and kind of plays into what you're saying that, for years, I was so excited, with groups like the Yes Men and like groups that were using humor to do culture jamming and parody and like very smart, but like from the left,
Yeah.
critique of neoliberal capitalism and that.
Right.
Now this is now right fascism happening. And so they've also discovered, I mean, they're no, it's not like the left invented using humor for critique, but they're mobilizing it in a really smart way, I think, too. And I wondered if you looked at like how the left mobilizes humor versus the right. I mean, in a lot of ways, it struck me as like, when abusers say, oh, like sexual harassment, oh, I was just joking, honey. Oh, you can't take a joke. It had that ring to it. And that also we were supposed to not, like the rest of the campus were somehow, we weren't supposed to take it seriously because they were just going to be cracking a bunch of jokes, and that's kind of how they market themselves, these two speakers. In fact, even Uncensored America, the student group that's here on campus, is like, we just, want to bring fun back into debates, which is just, it's white supremacy, exactly, racism. It's just white supremacy. Come on now. So we want to be mad about it, and they want us to, be able to take a joke.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so kind of two parts here. One, I kind of like how I was saying, whose joy, like who, which case, who is finding joy in what, who is making spaces online habitable for what, similar with comedy, who finds what funny, right? Funny for who? In a different project I just finished with one of my doctoral students, we actually looked at political TikToks, specifically looking at how, we looked at conservative TikTok and liberal TikTok, looking at specific features. If you're familiar with TikTok, the duet, the stitch, and the green screen. And yes, a lot of very interesting things about humor actually came out of that project that we are working on now. Specifically, that we actually found that conservative TikTok uses a lot more humor as opposed to liberal TikTok, which is more commentary. So which is kind of an interesting shift in how these two sides of TikTok are using, not even to talk to each other, they just use these features to yell at each other on TikTok. But it's definitely something. So again, I kind of didn't see it in this project, but in current work I'm doing, absolutely.
Great. So it is 6 o'clock and I believe another group has to use the room after this, but thank you all so much for coming. And thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Grammatics,
Thank
for
you
this
for
wonderful
having me.
talk. Appreciate it. And I'm gonna try to take a screenshot first
Yeah.
before people leave.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, well, they're already leaving. Well,